Toronto and Tampa. Man, what a turn of events here in this series. Leafs are up 3-1 going into Game 5. Oh God, on Thursday night in Toronto with a chance to wrap this thing up. They get smoked in Game 1 and then 3 wins in a row, 2 of them on the road in Tampa. The Lightning are going to come in to Toronto, a pissed off bunch. John Cooper will be getting them all riled up for that game on Thursday. But before we get to that, just an unbelievable couple of games. I watched the finish to that game on Saturday, that third game, and then what a finish it was. This comes 3,500 plus days after they blew that 4-1 lead against Boston, of course, and lost. And so, this time, last night, Toronto's down by 3. Find a way to come back. Alex Kerfoot is the overtime hero. Things feel different. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here with this team. Case, I'll go to you first. Just your thoughts on this series so far and where Toronto is at, up 3-1.
Yeah, boom, 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 boom. That's me banging that drum, banging that don't bowl out a team in the playoffs drum. And Tampa blew them out in Game 1, and I just kept saying it. Every single Leafs fan I talked to for the next day and a half, I was saying, don't blow out a team in the playoffs. Don't blow out a team in the playoffs. You'll see what happens. Well, the Leafs turned it around and did the exact same thing, and that scared me because I don't know how the double negative thing works in the playoffs. So, but that was quite the game to watch. I didn't watch so much of that one, so I don't have a ton of comments on the play other than, they blew them out. And then Game 3, it's funny. I talked to some Leafs fans, and I like the opinion that someone gave me. They said the Leafs lose games that they should lose, and they lose games they should win, but they never win games they should lose. And that was Game 3. So I think that for the psyche of this team and for the fans, that meant a lot to them. And they got outplayed in that game for sure. And they ended up pulling it out and winning the game. I've loved how feisty this series has been so far. It's been an absolute zoo to watch at times. It's no 136 penalty minutes like the Devils-Rangers Game 2 had, but it's been a lot of fun to watch. And then, I don't know, you can take me out to dinner maybe, or however you guys Leafs fans want to thank me. I like Kraken a lot as a gift, but I have been such a good luck charm for this team. I tuned it in late into that game on Saturday to watch them win. Last night, after the Devils game, I was like, I'll watch the Leafs Tampa. It's 4-1, but I'll watch the rest of the game. I turned it on. 20 seconds later, Matthews scores. They proceed to score 3 goals in a row to tie the game and then win it in overtime. You're welcome, Toronto. I won that game for you. It was all me. Yeah, that's all I want. A thank you, maybe a gift basket, whatever. Yeah. A lot of fun to watch, though. We'll get into the details. I'm sure Chad's going to talk about some suspensions and stuff like that, some juicy little details. So once Chad talks about it, I'll give my opinions, but let's hear it from the Leafs fan.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just to start, man, what a crazy series. Did we expect anything less? The answer is no. We all expected this absolute gong show. And even in terms of goals for, in the playoffs right now, these teams are number 1 and number 2. Toronto is number 1 and Tampa is number 2. In terms of goals for per games played, the actual goals are 19-16 in favor of Toronto. I mentioned a stat last episode. Toronto is the only team other than the Colorado Avalanche of last year to outscore the Tampa Bay Lightning in a playoff series since their first of their 3 runs started, so 3 years ago. Toronto and Toronto and Colorado were the only 2 teams to outscore them in a series. So if the Leafs keep this up, odds are they're going to have a pretty good time. And things are going pretty well for them right now. But like you mentioned, Harp, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we've seen 3-1 leads in series disappear, and we don't want to put any bad juju on this one. But yeah, Case, you mentioned the suspensions. Let's get into that. Game 1, Michael Dum Dum Bunting makes the dumbest of dumb plays ever and gives the dirtiest elbow to the head of Erik Cernak. Not that anyone should ever wish an injury on another player or whatever, but I'll take that trade-off all day long. Michael Bunting for Erik Cernak. It is what it is. Like, it was a dirty play. It should have never happened, but the Leafs have obviously very much benefited from Erik Cernak, one of the best defensemen on the Tampa Bay Lightning, not being in the lineup, as well as Victor Hedman being out for Game 2. Yeah. That was a big thing that went towards the Maple Leafs winning Game 2 in a blowout. You mentioned how the Leafs got blown out in Game 1, and Casey, you said never blow out a team in the playoffs. Well, Harper, we posted that video of your radio hit on our Instagram. Just look at the comments, man. Day of, it's so funny. All the comments are Leafs still stink, Leafs suck, like this and that. And we're just waiting. We just waited on it. And then we saw what happened in Game 2, 3, and 4. And the Leafs were pissed off, clearly, that they got embarrassed on home ice. And they took that personally. Now going into Game 3, Case, like you mentioned, they got outplayed. They got outplayed in Game 3 and 4. And traditionally, like you said, the Leafs have never been able to win those games. They always seem to lose games that they should have won, where the expected goals are 8-1 for the Maple Leafs, but they have Jack Campbell in net and he lets in 2 softies and they lose 2-1 or something. So it's one of those things, man, where it just feels different that they're able to close out these kinds of games despite the fact that they've been outplayed. Does that make me feel really confident going into Game 5, 6, and 7? Hell no. You want to be the better team on the ice. You want to see the underlying numbers and the eye test be very good for your team. And they haven't been these last 2 games, except for I can't even say Game 3 overtime because they got outplayed and Samsonov literally stole that game. So I'll say they've gotten outplayed except for the last 10 minutes and overtime of Game 4, because all of a sudden, man, they just stepped it up. And I remember when it was 4-1, I was thinking about turning it off. I texted Adam. I'm like, hey, do you want to play some PlayStation? And then I was going to watch the game on the side type thing, not pay too much attention to it, because you still have to have it on, but it wasn't like, I thought they were done. I was like, okay, going back to Toronto, to best 2 out of 3, 2 are at home. That's okay. I still think the Leafs had the advantage in the series if that were the case. But then Adam said no. That might have helped out a little bit. He said thank you as well, just like you did, Case. I continued watching intensely, and then they get 1, and it's 4-2. And you look in the eyes of the players, and it's like, okay, they know they have work to do. They know that when they scored, it was like, okay, maybe we'll be able to do this. Then they get another one, and it's 4-3. And then the look in the players' eyes changed entirely. It turned from, yeah, maybe we can do this, to we are 100% doing this. And then they tied it at 4, and I went nuts, like absolutely nuts. It was insane. The last minute of that game, though, they were hemmed in their own zone, and I thought in true Leafs fashion they were going to blow it after coming back. That would have been just ridiculous. Then they go into overtime. They possess the puck really well. Morgan Rielly has stepped up in the previous game with the OT winner, sifting it through from the blue line. Well, similar play. This time, Alex Kerfoot gets a stick on it, puts it in, Leafs win, and they're up 3-1 in the series. What a feeling, guys. I can't express to you how that game made me feel. It made me look at this team and just think, like, something here is different, because that's a game they lose 9 times out of 10 if it was the team from last year or the year before or the year before that.
When I think it was 4-2 and they went on the power play, and I said, if they score on this power play, I said it out loud, I said, if they score on this power play, they win this game. And Sauston Matthews just taps one out of the air and in the net, and I was like, oh, it's over. Like, they've all the momentum. There's 8 minutes left in this game. They're going to tie this and go to overtime, and it happened. It was great. I admittedly, that was the first time I've actually rooted for the Leafs in over a decade. Last year in the series, I said like, oh, I'm kind of rooting for them, but realistically, I was like, let's go Tampa. Let's knock them out of this. This year, I'm rooting for them. I was rooting for them in that game. I'm rooting for them in the series.
Yeah.
They look different. I think they're going to win this series, and then we'll see what happens in Boston.
True. I wanted to say this as well. I think Leafs fans...
Knocking on wood for you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to say this as well. I think Leafs fans have been waiting for a moment where their superstars just take a stranglehold on the game and do something about it, and just take over and say, no matter what you guys do to try to defend us, it's not happening because we're the best players on the ice. You see the Oilers obviously are a team where their superstars are able to do that game in and game out, whether it's Draisaitl or McDavid. Those two guys can say, okay, enough's enough. We're taking over this game. And despite the fact that everyone knows Austin Matthews is one of the best players in the entire league, scored 60 goals last year, despite the fact that everyone knows that Mitch Marner is one of the best passers in the league, a Selke candidate perennially now going forward, there's still some doubt in whether these guys can actually take a hold of games, especially in the playoffs. Well, I think last night showed us that these guys have that ability, and it showed fans that they're sick of this shit too, and they want to get over the hump just as much as every single person in Leafs Nation. So that was just so thrilling to watch and so encouraging. Because Case, remember we were talking earlier in the year, I think it started because I commented on a post in The Athletic when Matthews wasn't scoring. And I said something like, why is it that when Matthews isn't scoring, all the talk is, okay, how do we free him up? How do we get him extra minutes against lesser competition? Who can we put on his wing to make sure that Matthews scores more? But then when McDavid isn't scoring, the conversation is different. It's like, okay, he'll figure it out, and he always does. Why is it a dichotomy? Are they really number 1 and 2 in the league? Well, Matthews all season until about the last 10 games, it was a bit of a crapshoot of a season, to be honest. He didn't have a great year, then started to ramp it up, and now that we're in the playoffs, the most important time of the year, he showed that he doesn't need anything else or anybody else. Him and Marner are able to take over a game themselves.
It seems like maybe he needed to get punched in the head a little bit.
Maybe that. Yeah, well, we didn't even talk about his first fight. Oh, my God. Where he got jumped by Stamkos. That was bullshit, by the way. That was so dumb. But anyway, I'm just so...
It was fun. First time ever. 60-60.
Yeah, I'm just so happy with where the series is at right now. And I love the players' demeanors after that game, after a ridiculous comeback game, a game that will be remembered forever as one of the greatest comebacks in Leafs history. After the game, it was like, well, job's not done. It was Mamba mentality, and you need that.
Exactly. I was going to bring that up. I loved Matthews' response. Just cold looking face, not too happy, not too jumping after that big comeback win. He just said, "Yeah, we're not finished yet. The job isn't complete yet." And I'm kicking myself, boys, because I made the mistake of turning it off when it was 4-1. I mean, I had to go to bed anyway because I had to get up in the morning. But then, my brother gets home just after 10 o'clock, I think, from working all day. And he said, "Did you see the finish to that Leafs game?" And I said, "No," but assuming that, Tampa tied up the series. But no, he said, "What a finish, man." And so I'm kicking myself a bit this morning. You better bet that I'm going to watch Game 5 in Toronto, that's for sure. All of it in its entirety this time. And, of course, watch them lose that one when I decide to watch with my dad. But again, cautious optimism. Chad, you and I were texting earlier. You're like, Harper, shut up. Don't say that, it feels different. But again, knock on wood, but things just feel a little bit different. And I think there are two things. Matthews and Marner have been unbelievable so far. They are producing. They've produced through these first 4 games of this series. And I think that finally, for the first time in the last 3 years or so, we've seen them try to load up and add the right veterans. Guys like Nick Foligno, Lyubushkin, go down the list. Spezza, who, was an effective player for them, but it just wasn't enough. I think they finally added the right veterans, and like Ryan O'Reilly at the top of the list. Have always loved this player. He has put his mark on this series. Like, I don't know how they have to re-sign him after these playoffs are over. He's the one who ties up the game late in regulation in Game 3 and then helps to screen Vasilevsky on the Morgan Rielly overtime winner. He's talking to the guys. And won the
face-off, too. That's the most important part.
Exactly, and won the face-off. He's huddling. He's got the guys. He did this in Buffalo and in St. Louis, where he won in 2019, by the way, as we know, and won the Conn Smythe Trophy. This guy knows how to play this time of year and is an absolute gamer. He's bringing the guys in before a big face-off. Just a leader. Him, number one. Luke Schenn had an unbelievable Game 3 as well. Knows how to play against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Jake McCabe, in his first ever NHL postseason, has been just a physical presence on that blue line. And a different goaltender as well. Ilya Samsonov finally and truly getting the chance to be the guy in the playoffs for a team, because when he was in Washington, got that chance a little bit, but I think that Laviolette didn't have a lot of trust in him and ultimately moved on from him. So I think between Matthews and Marner producing so far, putting that to bed that, your big stars can't produce in the playoffs. Well, they have been producing. And then the right veterans being added into the mix who have really made an impact so far, I think are the two key differences for me. And why I say that things feel different so far. But, man, this has been a hell of a series so far. The drama, the back and forth, the comments between the two coaches, the things that have happened, it's been awesome so far. I cannot wait for Thursday night.
Yeah, absolutely same. And something I wanted to mention, too, is, like, this series, in terms of the goal scoring, is kind of going similar to last year, through the first 4 games anyways, that is, where it's been pretty high scoring, and we haven't seen Andrei Vasilevsky be very good at all. Like, his numbers, both surface level and underlying, are not very good, and that worries me a bit going into these next 3 games, because playoff Vasilevsky, when the guy turns it on, can be scary. So the Leafs are going to have to do everything they can to close out this series. It is not going to be easy. I was talking to Nate earlier today, who obviously is a big Tampa Bay fan, has some wild takes, by the way. He said their D-core was better this year than it was last year, even though they replaced Ryan McDonagh with Nick Perbix. But anyways, I digress from there. I was talking to Nate earlier, and he was like, man, we'll have to see what happens. Like, it kind of feels like Tampa just needs a rest and needs a break, and kind of almost feels over, was the vibe that he was giving. And I said, man, this series is far from over. Like, it's only 2 games down. We've seen already New Jersey be able to come back in a series down 2-0. Down 3-1, sure, it's a little bit more difficult because you're staving off elimination in Toronto potentially twice for if you're Tampa Bay. But, man, this series is not over, and I wanted to get that out there because in typical Leafs fashion, like, if they lose this lead, this will be the epitome of what it is to be a Maple Leafs fan, going to blow a 3-1 lead. But like we've mentioned already, it feels different. We're trying not to get ahead of ourselves, but I truly and honestly believe in this group, and I'm more confident than I have been ever in a playoff series.
I want to make a sweeping statement about the Devils in a similar fashion, but first I want to say that I think maybe this Bunting situation could have been the best thing that's ever happened in Toronto, because they've been great with him out of the lineup.
Yeah.
Previously, the suspensions have killed them. Kadri asked that we don't bring him into it, so I won't. But
Common man.
bunting out has worked. And now there's the headline is that he's not going to be back in despite being done his suspension. So I find that really fascinating. I thought 3 games was maybe a lot. I think there's definitely a suspension there, but 3 games was pushing it maybe. I think there is a lot to do with who Bunting is. I don't think that he has a very good reputation going on. So that plays a factor for sure. But I'm excited to watch the rest of this series. I am rooting for the Leafs for one series in the playoffs, and then I will go back to being a common Leafs hater. I think I have worked myself into the category of a sensible Leafs hater, where I know when to point out when they're doing good, and I love to point out when they're doing bad. So we'll go back to that in a week. My last sweeping comment that I want to make about the Devils before we wrap up this episode is 2 things, 2 ifs. If they can play like they played last night, and if they can get Palat and Meyer going, they can beat anyone in this league. I am very cautiously optimistic when I'm saying that. Like, I don't have high expectations. I'm really just hoping that they can get out of this series, and then we'll see from there.
Yep.
I don't expect them to win the Stanley Cup, but I said before in our playoff preview, I said they play games where when they play in this manner, they could beat anyone in the league. They just have to string 4 of those each series together. While they play like they did last night, and they get Palat and Meyer going, hook the fuck out, because they could upset some teams.
There's something to be said, too, about a team who is freshly into the playoffs, a team who is on the up and up, who has just made the playoffs for the first year with their core. There's something to be said about how those types of nerves differ from the types of nerves experienced by players on, say, the Maple Leafs, who haven't got out of the first round in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like Jack Hughes, what does he have to be nervous about? Nothing. He just has to go out there and play his game because there are 0 expectations. It's similar to the Leafs back in 2017 when they played the Washington Capitals. So free out there to do whatever they want. And now that the initial jitters are gone, not nerves, but jitters are gone, I think this team is in a great position. And also, Case, going back to, before we wrap up, going back to the comments you made about Bunting, do you guys think he should be in the lineup in Game 5? And if so, who comes out?
No, I don't think so. Well, first of all, Matthew Knies has been unbelievable since he got inserted in. He's not coming out. I don't know who you take out with Bunting coming in. I think he's played his final game as a Toronto Maple Leaf. I like the player, but that was a dumb move. And, again, like when you get taken out and someone gets inserted in that plays really well, like Matthew Knies, you can't. Why would you change that lineup right now? You're not taking out a guy like Achari either. He scored in the last game.
I think the consensus would be Kerfoot, and then he scored the winner.
Exactly.
Before that winner, I would have said maybe take Kerfoot out.
Yeah.
I think it would be Lafferty, to be honest. I think he would be the first one to go.
And Elliot Friedman did mention him. No, Elliot did mention Lafferty as the guy to maybe come out, but I don't know. I just think right now you're not screwing with anything.
No.
But, Bunting can certainly be an effective player. It's just that's just going to be a tough move now after that suspension and what he did in Game 1 to try and put him back in and take someone out. But yes, I did hear that. The one guy, though, would be Lafferty because, Knies is not coming out. Achari, Kerfoot now, none of those guys. So we'll see. I personally don't think he comes back in, though.
If he comes back in, put him in the bottom 6. Put him on the 4th line. Don't stop putting him with Matthews. The guy plays a whole different type of game, and you can tell in Game 1, the look on Matthews' face when he would start a scrum in the crease, Matthews would be like, oh, fuck, why are we doing this
Again.
right now? I'm gassed. I've been on for 56 seconds. I need to get off right now. And you're starting a scrum in the crease over absolutely nothing. Like, okay, I guess I'll go in there. Put him out with like-minded people if you're going to put him back in the lineup.
Yeah.
And I think that would be like the only option for the team. Like if a guy like Lafferty comes out, Bunting just replaces him on that fourth line, because also you don't really want to break up that third line of Nyes, O'Reilly, and Achari. They've been winning all of their minutes and have been in the offensive zone a ton.
That's a great line.
It's one of those things where, like, if you put Bunting back in, what are you expecting to get from him? You know, Lafferty's probably better defensively, even though Bunting is like a 60-point player back-to-back seasons almost. Like, you know, Lafferty might just be better fit for this situation and the minutes he's going to play. So it is what it is. Also, two rapid-fire quick ones here. Thoughts on Kyle Dubas yelling at fans in Tampa Bay? I personally thought it was hilarious. I want to know what he was yelling.
Loved it. Yeah, I'm dying to know what he was saying, what was going on there, but absolutely loved it. It's what you want to see, right? Like he you know, his job is on the line, and the passion and everything is coming out from both him and Keefe. I loved it. I loved it.
I did not love it. I don't think that's what you want to see from your GM of a National Hockey League team. I think that you want to see a composed, strategic person thinking about the next factor of the game, not listening to some drunk Floridian yelling bullshit at you. Like, you just move on. Like, you're not gonna. Have you ever seen that before?
No, I don't think I ever have. I thought it was hilarious because I have never seen something like that ever. But I hear where you're coming from, Case, and I kind of feel that way too. It's not a great look. I want to know what was said both ways, because for someone as composed and calm as Kyle Dubas to start yelling at some idiots in the crowd, they must have said some pretty crazy stuff.
Man, if it's like, for one, I thought it was funny too. I'd love to hear what was said. But if it's like a former NHL player, like if it was Jason Spezza, probably not going to ever be Jason Spezza doing that because he's never been that guy. But if it's a former NHL player who's a GM, maybe he's in his late 40s, early 50s, says something to some fans, I'm like, whatever. But the fact that Kyle Dubas is like a younger GM when you look at the GMs,
boy wonder,
and he's in the spotlight hockey mecca of the world, Toronto, you just expect him to be smarter. You're like, this is a very smart man to be in the position that he is. I bet he has to have a cool head to have gotten there. Well,
I'm willing to bet
that's fair too.
I'm willing to bet there was something other than coffee in his Timmy's cup when he was watching that game down in Florida, hanging out, trying to take the nerves off, watching his team play.
Man pisses off Maple Leafs GM.
Yeah, well, while he was watching his team play, and his deal is on the line. You know, his job is on the line. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. With that point exactly is why I loved it. I just think the passion there and everything. He could be out of a job here at the end. Who knows? But at the same time, Case, I get what you're saying, and I've heard a lot of other guys say the same thing, that it's not a great look professionally. Wouldn't be any surprise if a guy like Billy Guerin was laughing at a fan or whatever. Sure. And of course, all the time, like, we've seen GMs they slam their clipboard down, throw a couple F-bombs or whatever. But have never seen that before, where he's just going at it with some fans. Anyway, would have been nice to be a fly on the wall for all of that.